So we're gonna start mixing up our regular sourdough loaf, and I can tell you the measurements of this one, and I'll place a link to the recipe, but I'm gonna tell you I'm kind of mixing two methods of doing this. So love kitchen scales. If they're intimidating, I'm telling you, once you learn how to use one, they're amazing. I use the Pampered Chef one, that's just what I have. So I have my active starter. If you wanted to see how I fed up my starter yesterday, you can see the video before this on the playlist. And I'm going to put in, I'm gonna do 100 grams. She says 90. I don't know why, I just use 100. So I'm gonna measure that. So you can see it's a little kind of tedious, but it's exact, and that's what I love it. Kind of a math brain person. And also because you get kind of used to like what a gram looks like, and if you're over, it's not the end of the world, slightly. So see, I was a little bit over, not a big deal. So then I'll feed that up again and I'll make something else for you guys tomorrow. Okay, so 100 grams of starter, and I'm going to zero it out. So I'm back to zero, pretty easy. Now I'm gonna add my water. She uses 350 grams. She usually says warm. I like to use the warm. I was using cold because I was using filtered. Honestly, I'm just using tap water. Why? Because I had this really nice pitcher and it broke, and the water from the fridge is super cold and I didn't want to wait for it to cool. So I'm just using tap water. We are on a city well, or city water, so it does probably have chlorine in it, which they say is a no-no, but my loaves still look nice. Okay, so 350. It's kind of hard to do from the side. Ooh, 1 gram over. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, so what I do now, you can do this with your hands. I kind of use a whisk, and you're trying to incorporate it. Think about this being the yeast. You know when you get warm water and you sprinkle the yeast? That's all I'm doing. The yeast is our starter. Okay, the next step after this is to add 500 grams of unbleached bread flour. I gotta tell you, oh, I gotta zero my scale. Thanks, Hannah. I gotta tell you, I can't find unbleached right now, so it's just Sam's Club bread flour. I found that bread flour works better than my all-purpose flour, but if all you've got is all-purpose flour, then go for it. Okay, so 500 grams. Usually I use a cup measure, and for today, don't ask me why I took out the quarter cup. Making a mess. But that's why I'm using big heaping scoops. 500, gotta keep going. Bread flour in there. Okay, we're getting close. I might even go over just to show you what I do when I do go over. Okay, so I went over 507. So I just take some off the top. There you go, 500. It's so simple. So if you mess up, you can usually fish out some of it, and if you go over a little bit, it's not the end of the world. So, no big deal. Okay, I clean the scraper again. This is what I do. I'm gonna get rid of this kitchen scale to make it easier. I'm going to mix this up as much as I can with my scraper and incorporate the water. You can do this by hand. Some people don't like that sticky dough feeling. I gotta tell you, I don't love it. So I try to do it mostly with this, but I do have to get my hand dirty. As we get it mixed, a trick is to use a wet hand, but even if my hand is wet, when it's this not mixed, I find that I still get dough all over my hand, which is totally okay though. It's kind of fun. Or have your kids do it. I like to only get one hand dirty, so I have the other hand to hold the bowl and do other things. Okay, so it's getting there, and you can see it's not quite incorporated. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to scrape this off. I love these scrapers, by the way. They're Pampered Chef as well. No, I don't sell Pampered Chef, and I don't get a kickback. I have plenty of friends that sell it if you need a consultant, but know that I don't sell Pampered Chef. Okay, I'm gonna get my hand wet again to see if I can avoid. Actually, I think I have a spray bottle around here. Some people keep a spray bottle nearby. I have one. And then they just keep spraying their hand to keep the dough from sticking to it. This is not what's in the bottle. I have basic H, but then I can keep spraying my hand to kind of keep it from getting completely covered in dough. Okay, it's okay if the dough looks ragged like this, and I'm gonna explain why. That's honestly all I'm gonna mix. And I'm not adding the salt. I'm going to take this, and I'm gonna put the lid on it, and I'm gonna set it next to my oven in a warm spot, not like on the counter next to it, not on the grate. It'll get too hot. And I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and add our salt. So I've let my bowl sit for 30 minutes. Doesn't look too different, but now I'm gonna add my salt. And the reason why, I don't know why, but I think the reason why you let it sit is because if you saw before, it was still kind of floury, and this gives it a chance to better absorb the salt into the bread. And they use 9 grams. She says sea salt, all I have is regular, and so that's what I use. So actually, I sprinkle some in. Okay, that's like 5 grams. And then I'm gonna spray my hand with water, and I'm gonna kind of mix it, or even pull it before I add more. So you wanna incorporate the salt really well so you don't get just one salty spot. And if you don't do it great, it doesn't matter. Okay, that was 6. The reason why it doesn't matter is because you're going to be stretching and folding this dough for the rest of the day, kind of. So I'm going to incorporate this salt in. Just kind of squish it all around. I try to get as much as I can off the side. Do you see my hand is mostly clear because I sprayed it with water. But you want to kind of incorporate it all into one big ball. And now this is where I get kind of like, it just depends on my schedule and how much I remember. My goal is to let it kind of rise the rest of the day, but I'm going to stretch and fold it over the period, and I'll show you how to do that. So it's gonna go back and sit on the counter. I'm probably gonna let it sit for a couple hours. It's 10:30 now. So remember, we started mixing at 9:30, but by the time I got it and stuck it in the thing and set a timer for 30 minutes, now my clock says about 10:24, and before it was just after 9:30. It was like 9:40. So I'll come back and let you know the timing of this, and you have a great day. All right, it's about 12:45. I'm a little behind, I'm going somewhere, but you can see my dough has been sitting. This is what it looks like. I'm gonna spray my hand to get it wet, and we're gonna stretch and fold. So you kind of pull it away from the bowl, and you stretch it up and fold it over. Turn the bowl a quarter turn, get a grip on it, stretch it, and fold it. Turn it, stretch it, and fold it. It doesn't have to be pretty, like 3 or 4 of those. I probably could have done 3. Just kind of pat it back down, cover it, back on the counter, a couple hours later. All right, so it's about 3:30. I went kayaking, so I left it. You can see it's risen. I got my hand wet, and I'm gonna stretch and fold, turn a quarter turn, stretch and fold. So what I'm told is that this strengthens the dough. So we've only done 2 sets of these, and I'm gonna let it sit a little bit longer. The longer you let it sit, the more fermented it kind of tastes, more sour. All right, we're gonna do another set of stretch and folds on this regular sourdough. Stretch, fold. Our dough is getting nice and big.
Mom,
I'll probably do one more set of stretch and folds in a couple hours, and then I'll get into the shaping. 6, yeah. We'll probably shape it next. Okay, so we're going to do like a pre-shape, but what you do is I flour this really good because this is really puffy in that. I've wetted my hand, and usually they have a scraper. I don't own one. I have one on order. But before I shape it, they tell you to kind of put it out here on this board, and it's floured. I have it floured pretty good. And I'm gonna put some flour on the top, and I'm just gonna let it rest for maybe 10 minutes. I I bought a bunch of these flour sack cloths at Target, and I'll cover it for 10 minutes or so and come back and shape it. All right, so now we're going to shape this loaf, and you usually shape it twice. So, this might be a little sticky. Maybe I'll get my hands wet here. What we're going to do is we're gonna try to pull it together and kind of work it around. Oops, it's stuck. So usually I'm gonna roll it into a circle just because I find it easier to shape, when ultimately I'll probably more do a long loaf. But just kind of tucking the seam under and tightening it up. And some people are better at this. I haven't done too many, but you kind of like use the stickiness of the dough to kind of keep tucking and tucking under. So the seam is on the bottom. So you kind of want this tight little ball for the first shaping, and then we're gonna let it sit for another 30 minutes. So I got a nice little ball there that I'll cover up. Some people say cover it with plastic. I don't. We'll let it rest for 30 minutes. So I woke up, I set my oven to 500 degrees, and I put my Dutch oven on the lowest shelf. Not quite the lowest, one from the bottom. And I let it heat while I went for a jog for about an hour. Now I'm gonna open this, take off the lid, sprinkle cornmeal. Usually I would use parchment paper, but I'm out. I'm gonna put my loaf kind of into my hand. Usually you could lower it in with parchment paper. I'm gonna score it, spray it with water, stick on the lid, shut it, turn the temp to 470 and let it bake for 20 minutes. I'm telling you all this because I'm probably not gonna talk while I do it, and I'm gonna do it fairly quickly, because the reason why you heat it to 500 is because you're letting all that heat out. So you don't wanna have to wait for it to rise back up. So we'll see what happens. Sometimes I get a good spring, sometimes I mess it up. I'm just gonna use a regular knife to cut with. Hopefully it's really sharp, and I'm just gonna do one slit. I always leave my hot pad on top of my lid, because otherwise, honestly, I feel like I forget and almost touch that super steaming hot lid. Okay, so this is my bread from last night. Dump it into my hand. Probably should have floured my hand. Okay, put it in there. Gonna get a deep cut. The cut sometimes can be the hardest part. Like I can tell I didn't get it. All right, oops, spray. Push it back in. All right, so that's it. So 470, 20 minutes, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. All right, so I never know what this is gonna look like, but I'm gonna open this up, and all I'm gonna do is take the lid off, and we got a nice spring. And then I'm just gonna put it back in for another 20 minutes. And what that's gonna do, that second 20 minutes, is gonna darken up the crust. So the first 20 minutes was to get the spring. Now we're gonna get the darkened crust, and we'll show you when we're done. All right, our timer went off. Ooh, we have a beautiful loaf. Nice, I don't know if you can see that. It's a nice crust. I usually use this, it's just what works. See that? You need to let it cool for about an hour before you cut into it. And I'm gonna put my lid back on and stick this back in and turn the oven back up to 500, because that's how you do multiple loaves, and I have some other loaves to bake.